About 22 years ago, I was working at a packing plant and had just ended a 4-year long-term relationship where I was cheated on. I put her to the curb and started dating again. I met this recently divorced girl at work who was the receptionist. She was cute and a lot of fun, so we started seeing each other. Everything was going well, but I wasn't serious about anything long-term. She would drop hints about moving in together and I just never could pull the trigger with her. Something was wrong. We got really busy at work and I was volunteering for as much overtime as I could to make extra money. I worked evenings and my crew was small and we were really close. One night, one of my guys said he saw my boss's car at my girlfriend's apartment building. Since he lived about 30 miles away, I knew something was up. I had worked for him the previous weekend and my girlfriend ended up going to the casino that weekend since I got called into work. I knew something was up, so I walked up to her door and knocked. She asked, "Who is it?" I said, "It's me, baby. I dropped by to see how you're doing. I had a few minutes." She opened the door and let me in and he was nowhere to be seen. I asked him to step out of hiding and he did. I asked what was going on and for how long. They said they had been hooking up for about 2 weeks. My boss, who was recently divorced, was having hell with his ex. I had felt sorry for him up until that point. I said, well, I don't appreciate the high school bullcrap and that I didn't care if he saw her. If he wanted a turn, he could have just told me and we could have been adults about it. He apologized for it and then I told him that I didn't want this to interfere with my overtime. I still wanted to work as many weekends as I could. He said no problem. I never at any point acknowledged my soon-to-be ex's existence. She immediately became invisible and unable to make a sound in my presence. She kept trying to get my attention and apologize, but I never responded to her in any way. Between his messy divorce and my girlfriend, my boss had also been dating this cute young girl, about 20, that worked at the plant. A few days later at work, she asked me what was going on. I told her about what happened and she was a little hurt. I told her that it was good she found out now before it was more serious. She said we should go out and piss them off, which we did, and she was a freak. I had a lot of fun with her. One day in the office, while my boss was there, one of my coworkers asked me how my date went. I said it was great and possibly the best trade I had ever made. No regrets. My boss just got up and walked out. We didn't speak about anything other than business for about 2 weeks. On Fridays, we would sell employee sales to employees. The employees would go to the receptionist and pay and get a ticket to bring to us, and we would give them their food. My boss said, "Hey, I'm going to take these 10 boxes and I'll pay for them up front on my way out." The road out went right past the receptionist's office so I could see if he paid or not. He did not. Since he had seemed to make this decision on the fly, I called the plant accountant and asked him to check the cash box and the tickets to see if there were any there for my boss. I suspected that my ex would just fill out the tickets and have them ready, and that way we couldn't catch her unless the box was short. No tickets had been made, so he just got in trouble and was eventually fired. Later she was being scrutinized and seemed to be short in the cash box, but we were unable to tell for sure. So they had someone come in and pay for food with a $100 bill. Since there were no big orders done the rest of the day that would have required $100 as change, and since the $100 bill was missing from the box at the end of the day, they knew she was skimming. She got fired. I replaced my boss as the superintendent of the department. I got rid of a cheating girlfriend, had freaky sex with his ex, and got to brag about it to his face. Got rid of that same cheating boss, got 2 thieves fired, got a promotion, and still got to keep my overtime. Things usually don't work out that well for me, but that was priceless. OP, despite everything you achieved, what really was amazing was how you completely dismissed your ex's existence amidst her cheating. Good or bad, you didn't give her the attention she must have been sorely lacking to have cheated. You didn't feed into it. Instead, you played the long game. I hope you're the beacon for future survivors of infidelity to find the strength and courage to move on from their wayward spouses or jaded partners and reroute that love, energy, and strength toward themselves. Thank you for your post. Now let's get into today's second story. My wife and I have been married for 3 years and have a 2-year-old son with a very recent pregnancy, 10 weeks for our next baby. We both work from home and have been locked down for the past year almost, so we have been living with and seeing each other every day, none of which I am complaining about. I actually love being with the family. There are other stressors in my life though. I have low self-esteem, I stress about money, I stress about my extended family's health, and I stress about my job. But I try not to let any of this affect my family life, at least with my son. My wife is fully aware of the stress I feel. I have expressed I am stressed enough times, and I accept most of it cannot be changed at this time. My wife and I are open with each other about everything, at least so I thought, and we both have our faces registered for unlocking on each other's phones. I had full trust in her and never once doubted anything she was doing on her phone, no matter the hour or lack of response while she was on social media. I let her have it because I fully trusted her. Cut to last week, and I was just bringing her phone to her from another room. The phone was lying down flat, and I turned the screen to face me like I generally do, expecting to see her home screen picture of our son. Instead, it opened to her photo gallery, and I found some barely clothed pictures and one incriminating one of her lying down and slightly pulling her underwear. I didn't want to believe what I was seeing and handed her the phone. It was killing me, and I had to confront her to ask what those pictures were. This is where the lie started. Her first response was to just say, "I want to feel good about myself before I get the bump from pregnancy." I called BS on that and said, "You don't take pictures in those poses for that." She confessed that she was sending them to someone, but that was all it led to. I didn't want to know who or how it happened. I was just starting to process everything. I chose to ignore it for that day, mostly because I was in shock and also because I had to take care of our toddler. I was distant the whole day, not wanting to be with her. I wanted space. I browsed Quora and any other forum for information or advice that night. I had no one to talk to and nowhere to go in lockdown. I barely slept, and the next day I demanded to know who it was. Turns out it was a guy from work, and they had been using their work Teams chat to communicate. I asked her how far it went, and she said just the pictures, nothing more. I suspected more BS and then asked to see the chats on Teams and on Instagram. She was hesitant. She didn't want to show me out of fear of hurting me. Yeah, I know I should have called it. I was getting more upset. I wanted to give her the benefit of the doubt, but I told her I couldn't continue until I saw the messages. She still gave the excuse that she didn't want to hurt me, but I was beginning to see the pattern. The next day was a work day, and because we share an office in her house, I could see a few times that she was furiously typing away on a Teams chat. No guess who it was. I confronted her after work, and she still did not want to show the messages. I gave up, and I told her I needed to see it, otherwise we were separating. She came to me the following day and confessed that she had lied. They did meet twice, and the last time was a week earlier when all they did was kiss. I got incensed. I knew they didn't just kiss, and compounded with all the trickle truths. It was even crazier to think I'd believe that. I demanded then and there that she show me the chats. I knew she had deleted the messages on Instagram, and the slimy affair partner was trying to purge his chat messages. The sheer volume of messages was telling. I saw messages for a whole 2 hours going back 3 months. It started off flirty, then crossed a line becoming sexually charged, even expressing how they would have sex with each other. She was pining for him on the chats, and what was worse was that they both stated what they were doing was wrong but continued to do it. Now we're in lockdown here, so we can't really go out except for groceries, etc. Yet these two decided their escapade was worthy enough to forego the lockdown and our marriage. We've been fighting every day since. I don't think she's remorseful, even though she had said she is. She is becoming headstrong, suggesting that she also has her feelings and that she doesn't have to live like this by this. I mean, me looking through her phone now, not trusting her. She blames the affair on me not being intimate with her and not giving her the attention she needs. I told her she had broken me and thrown away our marriage, but she wants me to just get through it so we can mend the relationship. Writing this down, it feels like I am being a chump and taking all of this. Maybe I am just weak, but I am scared of how our children will be impacted. I love them so much. We have marriage counseling in 2 days. I am bracing myself for the criticism from her and the case that she uses that as an excuse for what she did. I need some guidance on what to do. I am afraid I am not financially stable enough to endure it, and we have a baby going to be born soon. How can I build trust when she's gaslighting me? Sorry if this is long. I have other outlet for my grief. OP, you need to divorce her. Dude, you can't mend this if she isn't taking any responsibility for what she's doing. This was never your fault. She knows that. She's only saying that to avoid the guilt and shame internally for her. They even knew what they were doing was wrong, and they still did it. Don't let your kids suffer due to you both staying together. Get out of there and separate ASAP and then start to look for a divorce when you can afford it. You gotta put yourself and your family first. Don't let her walk all over you. The fact that she kept lying, didn't disclose everything and was trickle-truthing and still blames you. There is no going back. Once that affair fog/lust goes away and she's sitting there alone, she's gonna come crying back to you. But that's where you take your worth and move on. Take your power back and end this relationship and be co-parents. This relationship isn't salvageable. Good luck. Now for the final story. I found out the truth a couple of days into a family vacation with wayward wife and 2 kids. I posted previously in relationship advice about this. I kept things hush-hush until we got back and had a confrontation with wayward wife after the kids were asleep. During the confrontation, she refused to admit she did anything wrong even though I was insistent that I knew something was going on. I somehow thought she would admit it, but she would not. I told her that I had seen her texts and told her what I saw. Only then did she admit that she was having an affair, but she downplayed it by saying AP was a drug addict. He was young, 25, and a former student of hers. She is a high school teacher. They shared an emotional connection because he lost a friend and she lost her mother a couple of years ago, and she admitted that it went too far and it got physical and she was ashamed. It seemed like she was genuinely sorry for what she did. So yes, full EA and then PA. I said that I wanted her to cut it off if we would have any chance of reconciliation. She did nothing that night as it was late and slept in a different room. The next day I told her again that she had to cut it off and that I wanted to witness it. She sent him a text message that was really short and said, "In the interests of my family, we need to stop seeing each other." There was no response at that time. Pretty weak breakup in my opinion. She went to spend the night at an empty family friend's place, as I said I needed space. There was no contact with AP that evening, at least by phone or text. Barf. The next day I asked if AP wrote back. She said no, he didn't write back and that he wouldn't. I told her that I didn't believe that he didn't write back and that I wanted proof they were over. She said she didn't want to phone him because it was already over. She refused to let me see her phone, though, as that was obviously an invasion of her privacy. The next day she sent me a text saying she got a response from AP with a snapshot of the text history. It was such a polite response. "Best of luck to you and your family. I am certain this was a fabrication. I mean, who ends a passionate relationship like that?" I was really hoping that reconciliation would be an option after the initial confrontation, but this looks like full-on affair fog to me. I can't believe anything she tells me. I told her that I didn't buy that they could end it like that, so abrupt and polite after the connection they had. She insisted there was nothing else she could show me. I guessed that she was deleting her texts, so perhaps that was true. She wanted to spend the night at the family friend's place again, as she felt suffocated staying in the house. I am certain they will meet. Looking for some advice or maybe reassurance on what I should do. I'm trying to arrange a meeting with a lawyer. Do I just let her do her thing and proceed with planning for divorce? Trying to bust her in the act. Gather more evidence. Should I get the family friend involved? Not sure if I can even trust them as they are close to her family. OP, you need to get a meeting with a lawyer and let her know that in absence of proof you are proceeding down the path of filing for divorce. Make sure the lawyer knows her AP is a drug addict. You need to protect your kids. She is almost certainly claiming she is staying with family and friends so she can communicate with her AP in peace, and as you said, she is most likely continuing to meet him. She should be able to tell you where she is staying, but she won't, as she doesn't want you to find her with him. Don't keep her secrets, but you can't count on what her family friend will do. This friend may in fact know about the affair already and be facilitating it. You also can't discount the possibility that this is a continuation of things that happened when he was her student and that this is long-term infidelity. Thanks for taking the time to listen to today's stories. Please like and subscribe if you haven't already, and comment below on what your thoughts are on today's stories. If there is a story you would like to share with me about your own situation or someone else's, then please do not hesitate to contact. My wife, 46 female, seemed perfectly content in our relationship. She never told me, 49 male, that there was anything bothering her. As a matter of fact, she had it made. Even though she worked and made her own money, she was married to me, and my family was extremely wealthy and kind. A few times I grew weary of her, thinking she might not be as mature or smart as me. She would joke about finding other men attractive. When we watched a show with a woman that had an affair going, she justified it by saying her husband wasn't giving her the attention she deserved. Since I gave my wife lots of attention, and my parents taught me that marriage should last forever, I never let myself believe anything was wrong. I did ask my brother once if he thought I should distance myself from her or test her in some way. He told me absolutely not, because it would be dishonest of me to investigate my wife without confronting her and telling her how I felt. He knew how hard it was for me to be honest about my feelings, especially when I felt like it could cause an argument or problem, when there might not actually be a problem in the first place. I realize now that he only told me not to do anything because he was closer to my wife than I ever knew. It all came to light one day when my wife told me she was headed to work, but she forgot her laptop. She absolutely needed her laptop in order to do any of the interviews she was supposed to conduct. I waited for her to return for it or call me, feeling that this was the test I needed to happen. She didn't come back for it, she didn't call me. As a matter of fact, I tried calling her, but it would only ring and go to voicemail. That was unlike her as well. Her phone was usually in her hand, in case her boss needed to get a hold of her. I knew basically right away that she wasn't at work. I decided to open the laptop to see if I could find anything. The pin was her birthday. It was signed into a Facebook profile I never saw before. There was one unread message. I clicked on it and it was from my brother. Said, "See you soon." I read previous messages that proved my wife and brother were having an emotional affair. They said, "I love you," and my wife said he was the one she should have married. Heartbroken, furious, and betrayed, I drove to my parents' house, where my brother still lived in the lower-level basement. My wife's car was parked there, confirming what I just read. My parents were not home. I snuck along the side of the house to the entry door to the basement. I had no idea if it was unlocked, or how I could get in without them seeing or hearing me. After a few seconds of deliberation, I decided to start filming on my phone and just slowly open the door. It didn't make a sound, and I was able to see clearly my naked brother on top of my wife. They had no idea the door was open, or that I was filming them. You can only speculate as to how broken I was at this moment. I stumbled away, leaving the door open. I had my proof, but I didn't feel like I could keep myself together. Nothing mattered to me, now that my wife of 14 years was cheating on me with my own brother. He had absolutely no consideration or respect for me. I felt pure rage replace the devastation, and I vowed revenge. I decided my brother didn't deserve any bit of our parents' inheritance or support. How dare he live with them for free and take his brother's wife? It's like he had no intention of living a life of his own. Well, his mooching days were over. The first thing I did, quietly, was file for divorce with the video evidence of my wife cheating. Before I could do anything else, my wife returned home, and I couldn't contain myself. I started yelling at her for the first time in our marriage. I showed her the video, shaking, furious, that she had the nerve to deny she was cheating. After watching the video, she took on this attitude like it didn't matter anyway, because I couldn't stop her if she wanted to marry my brother instead. She added that my parents would support them, because they loved her and him just as much as me. I just laughed and said she was right. She could marry my brother while they both lived on the streets, because they wouldn't have anything when I was through with them. She was completely stupid, with an ego blown up to the sky, so she packed her stuff and drove back to my parents' house. Imagine her surprise when she arrived to find my brother, standing outside the house with his stuff strewn all over the grass and mud. I already sent my parents the video. They kicked him out immediately and told me I would be the only one to receive inheritance, because they were both dead to them now. They were so set in the belief that marriage lasts forever, but even more important to them was the unbreakable bond between family. The respect and support you offer to your family, no matter what. My brother disappointed them beyond words, possibly even more than the betrayal I felt from him. He was their baby and he hurt their other baby, me. So, as soon as my wife saw that he was cut off with his stuff thrown everywhere, she didn't try to help him or stay, she just drove away. Back to my house, where I changed the locks and knew I wouldn't have to let her back in. She banged on the door, begging and sobbing for me to take her back. She called herself every name in the book, in an attempt to get me to open the door. Thankfully, her tricks didn't work on me. My instincts were right, she was a terrible wife. She and my brother, separately, were forced to searching for jobs and a place to live. In a few months, my wife's car, that she was living in, was repossessed because I stopped making the payments on it. Last I heard, she moved in with a friend and is trying to get back on her feet. I don't know what happened to my own brother, but he never tried to apologize to me. OP, your wife's desperation in the end was only what she deserved. She had a life with you, a good life, but she didn't even care. She started an affair with your dependent adult brother for some reason, and didn't even want to admit her fault until it could possibly benefit her. You absolutely dodged a bullet. Even though you experienced heartbreak, be grateful that you didn't have children with her, that you got evidence of their affair, and that you had support and the means to lose her as cleanly as possible. Some people aren't lucky enough to get proof, and the divorce ends up messy. As for your brother, the best thing for your soul is probably to come at peace with what happened and keep your distance from him. Understand that anyone you meet after this deserves the chance to earn your love and trust. You can have close relationships after this, and you have a fresh start to do it. Always remain honest and open with people about what you've been through, and observe them to see how much they'd really care about you. Thank you for sharing this story. Now it's time to get into our second story for today. My wife, 25 female, and I, 27 male, married young with my foolish belief that I would only have longer to love her. After just 3 years into our marriage, I knew she wasn't ready for a permanent commitment, contrary to what she said over and over again, which was that she wanted to be with me forever. She'd started messaging strangers with her phone, searching for local events and things that she could go to, with or without me. She started living her life side by side with me, but not with me. I wasn't in the metaphorical car. So, for that reason, our relationship became distant and more like roommates. We both knew it was happening, but neither of us wanted to talk about it. I knew she didn't care enough to hear how I felt, but she still told me she loved me and never made it clear that she was looking for another man. She always just said she was going out for air with some friends or to see her family. She was very close to her parents and sisters, who had children and husbands of their own. My wife also became friends with the people in our neighborhood. You might say she was closer to some of them than even me. One day she told me she was going out again, but it was a little earlier than usual. It was like 3 p.m. She didn't have a job, but I worked enough to support us completely. I didn't really consider it as unfair, because I enjoyed my work and wanted to provide for my wife. I asked if I could go with her, but she said it was her friend's birthday outing, so I wasn't really invited. I doubted this completely, but it reminded me that her birthday was in a few days. After she left, I opened up the living room curtains and sat on the couch with my laptop to look up birthday ideas for her. That's when I noticed a woman that looked just like my wife entering the neighbor's house. I was so confused I considered ignoring it, but saner thoughts prevailed. I walked across the street nervously, noticing only the screen door was closed. I hid beside it and only peeked my face around to see what I could see, which was nothing, just an empty living room and silence. I slowly opened the screen door and tipped it down the hallway in this neighbor's house. I didn't know the guy, I only saw him a few times, but I knew he was a bachelor about our age. I started to hear moaning coming from the room at the end of the hall. The door was open, so I just stopped and listened. When the moaning grew more intense, my broken heart raced. I knew I had to do something, so I just stuck my phone out and took blind video of the room. I was completely shocked that you could clearly see the neighbor having sex with my wife. It felt like I floated out of his house and back to mine. Without much thought, I locked up the house tight, but then I realized my wife had a key and our lives were completely entwined. I couldn't just cut her off without the legalities to back me up. Since her birthday was in a few days and she was extremely close to her family, I planned to put on a show they wouldn't forget. My wife shouldn't be able to continue receiving help and support from people around her after betraying the one person she made vows to. So I made a big deal about her birthday. I sent invites to her family and friends to meet at her favorite restaurant for a party. I had a portable projector that I set up, pretending it would be a video of our most precious moments. With about 40 people besides my wife in attendance, she was on her high course. She couldn't believe what lengths I went to for her birthday. I studied her for any trace of guilt and found none. The video started off with pictures from our wedding, but quickly cut to her getting effed by the neighbor. Everyone gasped and turned their gaze to my wife, who was speechless and terrified. What could she say? It was there for all to see. She started sobbing in an instant, and some people started getting up to leave. She ran to the bathroom crying, so all the guests, her closest friends and family, left. On the way out, a few of them, including her parents, told me they were very sorry she did this and they could not be helping her out if I chose to divorce. It was exactly what I wanted to hear. I felt 1,000 times better now that everyone saw it and knew the pain she caused me. I felt like I could get through anything, including a divorce. She was just an immature girl that wasn't ready to be married, especially not to me, who understood the true value and meaning of marital vows. When she came out of the bathroom, I was the only one there. I handed her divorce papers and told her if I wasn't a stronger man, she would have broken me. She tried begging me at this point, but it was pointless and the last time I would ever hear her whining. After this whole thing, no one wanted to see her. I know because she tried commenting on her friends' posts, asking why they were ignoring her DMs. She posted status updates, asking anyone and everyone for help until she could get back on her feet. Her friends' list started to shrink. One of the comments her friends posted suggested she try to get a job. She was infuriated and made excuses as to why she couldn't get one. Another friend told her, "This is what happens when you betray the man that takes care of you." That was my favorite comment. Shortly after I posted a selfie at the gym with my new girlfriend, she blocked me. I didn't notice until months later when I tried to get an update on her. OP, you are certainly right. This woman did not value the vows she took with you. Hopefully she wises up and realizes life isn't all about her every whim and desire. Relationships that are worthwhile take compromise and complete honesty. It doesn't matter where she goes in life. What matters is that you move forward and maintain hope for the future. It isn't hard to find a relationship, but it takes special observation and patience to find one that's worth keeping. You dodged a bullet, you didn't have children with her, and you got the proof you needed to have the divorce end in your favor. To top it off, you ensured she wouldn't be able to take advantage of anyone else in her life. You learned a valuable lesson here, and have the opportunity to help others through a similar situation. Thank you all for taking the time to listen to today's stories. If you enjoyed listening, please feel free to like and subscribe if you haven't already. Also, comment below with your thoughts on what happened. My wife and I were married for 8 years. For our entire relationship, we had a third wheel, so to speak. I never thought of Mike that way before, but very recently, everything changed for the three of us. We were best friends from a young age, and grew up roaming around our town together. All three of us worked our first job together. When I realized my wife wanted to become more than friends, I told our third wheel, my best friend Mike, about her advances. We were in our 20s at the time, my wife and I hadn't even started dating. He was really supportive of us, and swore to me that he didn't see her in a romantic light, so there was no competition or problem. After we got married, he became our handyman. I was never good with tools, but I made great money as an accountant for a big business company. We bought our own house in our mid-20s, and I thought our relationship was everything it needed to be. I made home videos showing our life how it was, and even introduced my sleepy, grumpy wife as the love of my life. Something seemed to be bothering her by the time we were married for 5 years. As much as I tried to talk through whatever was happening with her, she never opened up to me about anything major that needed to change. All she did was correct me on little things she thought I could do better. She also frequently updated the list of things for Mike to check or fix around the house. Mike was soon to be engaged. I met his fiancée and she seemed nice enough, but I didn't get to know her like Mike knew my wife. Mike was at our house all the time without his fiancée, whether he was fixing stuff for us while I was at work, or he was just over for a social visit when I was home. I never told him about the tension I was experiencing with my wife. I guess I was embarrassed and thought it was something I could fix. Even though I tried to improve how I did the dishes, drove, laundry, and cleaned, I'd catch her looking at me like she resented me. When I felt myself hesitating to look in her direction, I knew something had to give. She started leaving the house each day, about 15 minutes after I got home from work. At first, it was because she forgot something at the store, needed to see her mom, or something like that, but after a few days, she just stopped telling me where she was going. I got used to her leaving and didn't care that I didn't know where she was going, because it was nice to get time where I didn't have to worry about meeting her scornful gaze. After she left one afternoon, I decided to do some snooping in her bedroom. I was cleaning while I did it, so she couldn't be upset with me if stuff was moved around. While looking under the bed, I found another cell phone. It wasn't old, and it was actually still on. There was no passcode on it. It just unlocked with the swipe of my finger. There was only one chain of messages on the phone, and it didn't take me long to realize they were between my wife and Mike. My best friend was texting my wife on a secret cell phone, and the messages were exactly what you'd expect to find if my wife and best friend could fully express their love without worry. I was devastated. My heart was racing, and it was hard to believe she was doing this to me. Not only that, but Mike was heartless enough to cheat on his soon-to-be wife, Julie, with his best friend's wife. Even though my wife had been looking at me with scorn, I never thought she would start an affair with my best friend. There were messages about their sex, all the times they met up, and how bad it would be if either me or Julie found out what they were doing. I found out their affair began even before Mike met Julie. He was basically marrying her as a bonus to the relationship he counted on the most, the one he had to keep secret. My wife actually said I wouldn't have the nerve to leave her even if I discovered their affair. She said if I found out, she'd still have to be the one to divorce me, and if I tried to weasel out of alimony payments, she could just ask one of her friends to lie about me cheating with her. Anger replaced my grief. I took screenshots of everything and sent it to my phone and email address. I didn't want her to know I found the phone, because I planned on exposing them before Mike's wedding, if neither of them came clean before that. She came home with rosy cheeks and a shy smile. She greeted me warmly, but it was like I could finally see that she was just putting on a show. I felt stupid for failing to notice it before, but she was an excellent actress, and I never thought she would be willing to put on a permanent act for her husband, the man she shared her life and home with. How could anyone with a sound mind put on an act where they should feel the most safe and natural? Why wouldn't she just divorce me and honestly admit she just didn't want to be married anymore? I knew it wasn't anything I could have helped, because I tried talking to her. I wanted to know whatever it was that was bothering her, even if it was about me. She kept our evening together short and went to bed like everything was right with the world. I wanted so badly to wake her up and hear what excuses she'd for what I found. Mike was about to get married. That made it so hard to believe this was happening between them. Why did either of them feel like it was okay to be doing this? For the next 8 days leading up to my best friend's wedding, I asked myself these questions and more. I finally told my MAL the day before the wedding what was going on. She said it would probably be better for me to just keep my mouth shut, because they were adults and I would risk looking like a moron if I came forward with the evidence. She was only concerned about how much money the bride's family spent on the upcoming wedding, and the judgment my wife would face from my accusations. But it wasn't just accusations, I had proof. She and Mike really were doing this, and I felt like the best and only decision for me was to show everyone the truth. So the next morning, during the wedding setup, I prepared the screenshots I took to display on the projector during their vows. I was supposed to be Mike's best man, even though he was sleeping with my wife. I hated everything I laid eyes on. Felt like I took the red pill and learned the truth about my reality. As my best friend stood at the altar with Jolie, my wife and I sat watching them, in the crowd of wedding guests. Suddenly, the first screenshot popped up. After everyone got a chance to read it, there was a collective gasp. That's when Jolie and Mike looked up. Then the slide changed, showing 2 images cropped side by side. Images Mike and my wife sent to each other. One was of his package, and the other was of my wife in lingerie, looking very welcoming for whoever was meant to receive the image. People were screaming and getting up to leave before the third slide came. It was 2 long messages, one from Mike describing the things he wanted to do to my wife, calling her by name, and a response from her in kind. Jolie was silently sobbing, staring at Mike. She ran back down the aisle dramatically, and Mike looked straight at me. His eyes immediately dropped, and he sat down in the fetal position. I can only imagine how he felt at this moment. Maybe he felt as bad as I did. My wife got up to leave, but she was stopped by some guests and the bride and groom's parents. All but two people were talking, crying, or yelling. The two silent ones were my wife and Mike. They didn't have anything to say to the angry, hurt people surrounding them. I think they were in shock, but also knew that no matter what they said, it wouldn't matter. People left as soon as they came to accept that the wedding was off, and they weren't going to get any answers from the cheaters. Mike approached me and my wife. I was still there simply because I wanted to see if either of them would apologize to me. Mike told my wife that he didn't want to see her anymore. He said more, but as soon as he said he didn't want to see her anymore, my wife finally cracked. She sobbed and wailed. Mike turned to me and apologized for ruining my life. He left and I left my wife at the church. She tried to come with me, but I told her to get her own ride. She didn't have her own car, so her mother had to pick her up from the church. Her and Mike dropped off the face of the earth, completely shunned by their friends and families, except for my ex-Emil. She let her daughter live with her, but she didn't hesitate to express her disappointment. After I decided to tell the truth, it was like she realized how bad it was. She messages me on Facebook, sometimes to tell me how I dodged a bullet divorcing my wife when I did, because she only became more disappointing. Thanks to my evidence, the divorce went extremely well for me. My ex was ordered to pay me alimony, and the judge called her despicable. OP, I am so sorry your wife started an affair with your best friend. It's even worse because your best friend did this too. They lived a lie and didn't care. They only worried about getting caught because they would be inconvenienced. Your wife even told Mike how low she was willing to go, making up disastrous lies in the event of a divorce. It's a lucky thing you found this phone. Thankfully, you didn't have to live through the terrible fate your wife planned for you. I don't believe they deserved any less than the confrontation you gave them. They ruined several lives by starting and hiding their relationship. You have a wonderful opportunity to start over new and practice the knowledge you've acquired. Thank you for sharing this story. Let's now get into our second story for today. My wife and I were married for 13 years. In the 8th year of our marriage, my brother was sentenced to 5 years in prison. At this point in our life, my wife and I both worked full-time, but it just so happened that she was off during visiting hours at the prison. I asked her to start visiting him for me once a week. She could video call me while she was there so I could see him, but it was hard for him to hear anything I said. I wrote him letters that she'd bring. I was able to get off work a few times to visit him, but it wasn't more than 5 times in 5 years. I felt bad, but my wife and I had an expensive mortgage, debt, and bills to pay. I also felt like it wouldn't make much of a difference if I visited him in person or sent my wife to visit on my behalf. She paid him a visit once a week until the day he got out. My wife started talking about him a little more closer to the time of his release. She was really concerned about him having a place to move into and asked several times if he could move in with us. I didn't feel comfortable with that. I knew that after 5 years in prison, my brother was going to need room to spread his wings and enjoy the company of a woman. Since I was financially stable, I got him an apartment nearby. My wife started going to his place any chance she got to bring him food or help keep his house clean. This is about the time I started to realize she was behaving more like a wife for him. I planned on talking to her about it, but my brother got to me first. While she was at work one day, my brother came over. I was surprised when he came right out and said I worked too much and was falling short of loving my wife. I asked him what he meant and why he was saying this. He said he got to know her quite a bit over the past 5 years, and she confided in him that she wished I worked less. I asked why she didn't feel like she could talk to me about it, and to that my brother just shrugged. He said it might be my fault she was so attached to him. I didn't like him saying that either. I didn't know how to respond. I knew he was hinting towards how I'd sent my wife all those times to see him in prison instead of going myself. After this interaction with him, my wife continued going to his apartment while I was at work. She never told me about these visits. When I asked her not to go over there anymore, she didn't even flinch. She continued visiting him until my brother admitted to it. I forbade her to go over there anymore, but that didn't make a difference. I still had to work, so she still got to see him. Whenever I was home, the house was full of tension. We both knew she was betraying me by continuing to visit my brother. We both knew I suspected them of sleeping with each other, but neither of them would admit to something like that. The tension was filled with silence. One day, I decided to surprise my wife. I convinced myself that she wasn't cheating on me because they couldn't do that to me. They loved and cared about me. Starting an affair should have been impossible due to the genuine concern for me that I thought they had. I loved my wife, so I bought her roses and her favorite chocolate on the way home. I entered the front door quietly and snuck up behind her as she stood at the kitchen table. She was holding her phone, looking through pictures of her and my brother. She stopped to stare at the picture of them kissing. In shock, I gasped. She turned around, so I slapped her with roses. I told her to get out and started frantically scooping her clothes out of the dressers and into trash bags. She was just crying as she packed her essentials and the bags I gave her into her car and left. I sold the rest of her things, including her collection of expensive purses. Of course, she went to live with my brother, and I found out they were in a sexual relationship since the day he got out of prison. For 3 months, my wife thought she was doing the right thing. She thought she could live happily ever after with my brother after our divorce was final. Not even a week after that, my brother was arrested and taken back to jail. He's facing another felony charge. My ex lost her mind. She couldn't stay in his apartment without him, so she started begging me for forgiveness. She said she knew she messed up, but this was just something that happened sometimes. It was no more than an unavoidable accident, and she swore now that this happened to her, she would never ever let it happen again. Around the same time, my brother was begging me from behind bars for money or lawyer representation. I knew both of them were only out for themselves. I knew that if I kept entertaining them, they would only ever take advantage and hurt me. So for the foreseeable future, I decided to cut them both out of my life. It was extremely difficult because I was left without any relationship to compare to the ones I lost. But I didn't lose them because of anything I did. I lost them because they weren't worth having. I did everything I could to involve myself in social events and family gatherings, even though I felt like secluding myself. It paid off because on the days when I couldn't bring myself to leave the house, I had people out there waiting for me. They reached out, and when I didn't respond, they'd pay me a visit in person. Sometimes that was what I needed. I met a guy that I'm happy to call my best friend. It might be cheesy, but I'm glad I survived this double betrayal. I didn't give up on life or quit my job, even though I heavily considered it. OP, what happened to you is devastating. I am so sorry your wife started an affair with your brother. It didn't matter that she was the one visiting him in prison. You trusted each of them, and they still went behind your back. You cared about your brother enough to send the love of your life to check on him and make sure he didn't feel alone or forgotten. I'm glad you refused to blame yourself for this. Neither of them behaved like your brother or wife, and you deserve better. I'm glad you found out the truth, even though it was devastating. You meant to find out the truth, and at least you did before your brother went back to prison. Your wife might have just gone back to being your wife until she found someone else to start an affair with. You've done good by surrounding yourself with others and refusing to give up. I wish you all the best. Thank you all for taking the time to listen to today's stories. If you enjoyed listening, please feel free to like and subscribe if you haven't already. Also, comment below with your thoughts on what happened. My girlfriend and I had been dating for about 2 years before we broke up. She was somebody I thought I saw a future with, but I am glad that I found out the truth about her before I made a big step committing to her. We met on a dating app originally. Things actually didn't work out with us the first time we were seeing each other. We hooked up a couple of times, but neither of us was ready for a relationship, so we decided to stop seeing each other. About a year later, I ran into her at a supermarket, and we both recognized each other. I think during that run-in, we both thought that giving it another chance might be worth it. We started officially dating, and within a couple of weeks, we were committed to each other. I introduced her to my family about 6 months into our relationship, and they all loved her. They thought she was exactly what I had been looking for in a, and I agreed with them. About a year into my relationship with my girlfriend, my parents got a divorce. It was difficult for me to comprehend why they were getting a divorce, but I was an adult, and I wanted both of them to be happy. If ending their marriage was what was best for them, then so be it. Even though they were getting a divorce, they still remained cordial with each other, at least around other family members, so we could have holidays as we did. My mom started dating somebody shortly after the divorce was finalized, and she eloped with him. I guess he was technically my stepfather. After my mother got married to him, she called my sister and me to come over for dinner and meet the new guy. My girlfriend was close to the family, so she came along too. I thought he seemed nice. There weren't any glaring red flags that I was worried about. My mom lived about 3 hours away from me, so whenever I visited her, I normally stayed the night in my old bedroom. My girlfriend slept there with me that night. There was a point where I noticed she wasn't in bed, but she was the kind of person who frequently got up in the middle of the night to go to the bathroom, so I didn't think too much of it. I'd normally stay for breakfast with my mom after I slept over at her house. But in the morning my girlfriend was rushing me out. She didn't explain why, but she just needed to leave. I ended up doing what she said and saying goodbye to my mom before breakfast. When I asked my girlfriend about why she was in such a hurry, she just told me that she had a nightmare and needed to leave because she felt weird being there. Several months passed and we were getting ready to plan for Thanksgiving. My dad had just moved into a new house and was settling down, so he wanted to host. Because we were all still a family and we all wanted to be together on the holidays, my mother planned on coming to Thanksgiving with her new husband. My father was cool with it and he was prepared for everything that might come, so they didn't have to make the drive in the morning. I invited my mother and stepfather to come stay at my house the night before. They arrived Wednesday night and we had a nice dinner together and caught up after not having seen each other for a few weeks. Throughout the dinner, I noticed that my girlfriend was very quiet. She didn't have much to say, which was very unusual for her. Looking back, she was looking at her smartwatch a lot and messages that were coming through. Knowing what I know now, my stepfather was on his phone a lot messaging someone. I didn't have any reason to assume he was texting her at the time, but I know now that he was. I asked her if everything was all right after dinner while we were cleaning up, and she told me that she had just come down with a headache. Shortly after dinner, she excused herself to lie down because of it. That left me alone with my mother and new stepfather to chat about life. We put on a movie and about 15 minutes into it, my stepfather yawned and made a big thing about being tired and wanting to get ready for bed. My mother told him that she'd been wanting to see the movie and told him to go ahead without her. He announced that he was going to get in the shower and then go to sleep. I didn't think twice about it. After the movie, I went back to my room to go to sleep with my girlfriend. We left in the morning in a hurry and drove over to my father's house. I realized shortly after that I had forgotten 2 pans that I promised my dad that I was going to bring for him to borrow. I told everybody else that I would just run back really quick to my house and grab them. I drove home and ran into the kitchen to grab the pan. While I was there, I went into my bedroom to use the bathroom really quickly. While I was there, I heard some buzzing in the bedroom and didn't know what it was. When I got out, I saw that my girlfriend's watch was on the charger by the bed. She took it with her everywhere, so I was surprised that she left it behind, but we left in such a rush that I didn't think too much about it. I figured I would grab it for her and bring it to my dad's house so she could have it. When I took it off the charger, I saw that the first notification that was on it was a text message from my stepfather. Right away that drew some suspicion for me. I didn't know why they would have been texting each other. I opened the message to see what it was and I was completely floored by it. I couldn't see a message history on the watch, but it was an overtly sexual message. I honestly felt dizzy after I read it, like I was going to pass out from the shock of it all. I knew that my girlfriend had a messaging app on her computer that was linked to her phone, so she could discreetly send text messages while she was working. So I grabbed a laptop and tried to see if I could find anything on it. It wasn't a complete history of text messages. I could tell that those messages were separate from the ones on her phone, though I did still find some interesting things. The biggest thing was that she was sending explicit messages to my stepfather while she was at work. Apparently, it was something that both of them were very attracted to. They seemed to like the idea of doing something that they shouldn't while they were working. There were pictures sent of my girlfriend lifting up her shirt and exposing herself from her computer camera, as well as pictures of my stepfather from under the desk in his office. Essentially, they were spending a lot of time at work sexting instead of working. As soon as I saw everything, I knew that there wasn't a chance in hell that I would be staying with my girlfriend. So I took some screenshots from her messages and emailed them to myself. I wanted to have those as an option to get a little revenge on them, both for what they did. I went over to my dad's house, trying to think about what I was going to do on the drive there. My girlfriend's watch kept buzzing from messages my stepfather sent her. From what I could gather, They were trying to figure out a way to sneak off together to hook up. Part of me wanted to go into the dinner and expose both of them right away, but another part wanted to make sure I humiliated them. I got there, and I decided that holding on to my girlfriend's watch and waiting to see what happened would be the best idea. I pretended like everything was normal when I walked in. Every time her watch buzzed, I discreetly looked at it to see what the messages were. Honestly, I was a little bit grossed out about the things Dan was saying to her. It seemed like they had some kind of dom-sub thing going on, which was strange because my girlfriend never expressed interest in anything like that. He just kept telling her to do things, and a few minutes later, she would do what he said. It was bizarre. We had dinner, and I was noticeably quiet during it. Sitting across from my girlfriend like nothing was happening was painful, but I did it. My stepdad sent her a message halfway through dinner that I took a quick peek at. He told her to meet him in my car after dinner. I planned on making sure everybody knew about what was happening. We all enjoyed the rest of our dinner and had some light conversation. When we were all done, we gathered in my father's living room and turned on the game. My mother and father were actually getting along very well, better than I thought they would initially. They were laughing with each other and sharing a lot memories. My girlfriend told everybody that she needed some fresh air and was going to go stretch her legs outside. I offered to go with her, knowing that she was going to have to turn me down, and she just said that she wanted some time alone. About 5 minutes after that, my stepdad started digging around in his pockets, saying that he didn't know where his keys were. Why he needed his keys at that specific moment, I couldn't tell you. He asked me for my car keys so he could check my car to see if you dropped them on the way up. I knew exactly what was about to happen, but I needed to let them do what they were going to do so I could catch them. I gave him the keys and didn't say anything. My stepdad still hadn't come back inside from looking for his keys after a few minutes. I told my mom that I thought it was weird and she went out to check on him. They were both in the back seat of my car and in various states of undress while having sex. My mom screamed and threw the car door open and yelled at my stepdad, asking him what he was doing. My dad ran out of the house a few minutes later to see what was going on. When he realized what was happening, he ran at my stepdad and I had to grab my dad to keep him away from him. Honestly, I know physical violence isn't something I should approve of, but I had a lot of respect for him at that moment. He and my mom had just divorced, but he was jumping to defend her honor and I thought it was admirable. They tried to explain what was happening, but there was nothing they could say to make what they were doing okay. I told my girlfriend that I wanted her out of my house and there was nothing she could say about it. She tried to plead with me to give her some time, but I told her that she had until the end of the day Friday to be out. She called an Uber with my stepfather and they both left. I didn't love the idea of them going back to my house together, but there wasn't much that I could do about it. I returned to my house with my mother the following day and saw that my girlfriend was still there. My stepfather had left, but my girlfriend was refusing to leave. She said that she was technically a tenant there and she had rights and she was entitled to stay and have time to pack her things and find a new place. It was a nightmare situation of her just trying to stay there as long as she could without having to pay any rent. There was a 2-week window of time when she was still in my house and the tensions were high between us. She took it upon herself to tell me that my stepfather was better in bed than I was, and she told me about how they were sneaking around behind our backs since the day they met. That explained why my girlfriend was so eager to leave the first time we met him. She might have felt guilty then, but it didn't seem like she felt that any time after. When she left, I decided that I was going to send the screenshots I had of her doing inappropriate things at work to her boss. I found out through the grapevine that she and my stepfather both got fired for their behavior. It definitely went against their codes of conduct. Now, I am single and hoping to find somebody who isn't a nightmare. My mother divorced her husband and she is now taking time for herself. After everything that happened, my father has still been there for her. There's a small part of me that hopes they'll get back together. OP, I'm so sorry you had to go through all of this. It definitely sounds like a nightmare situation to go through. I agree your girlfriend probably wanted to leave the morning after dinner at your mom's house because she felt guilty about what she did. If she hooked up with your stepfather the night before, then she might have had regrets at first. I know a lot of people get excitement out of cheating and doing it so blatantly, and I just think it's disgusting. Cheating is already disrespectful, but doing it in a way where you might get caught is even lower. You know what you're doing is already going to hurt someone and you risk having them catch you. It definitely seems like neither of them had anyone's interest but their own in mind. They were selfish and careless, and both of them got what they deserved, getting fired. They probably should have had more go wrong than that. Now let's get into our second story for today. My wife and I have been married for 8 years. We met in the workplace and started dating a few months after we started talking to each other. I thought she was the love of my life. I saw a future with her and I wanted to build a family with her. She worked in the HR department and I was in our sales department. Because of my job, I travel a lot for work. It was a perk that I really loved until I met her. I hated the times that I had to go away and leave her back home all by herself. We got married after 2 years of dating and we were working on building our dream home from the ground up. We found a plot of land and decided that instead of looking for a house and remodeling it to fit what we wanted, it would be better to just do it ourselves. It was a big endeavor and it was stressful at times, but we didn't regret it for a second. We hired a project manager. We'll call him Cliff. He was a jack of all trades when it came to construction work. He knew every type of person we needed to get the house up and running. I made really good money and I was at the top of my field. Because of that, with everything going on with the house, I thought it might be beneficial for my wife to quit her job in the HR department and focus on getting all that together. We agreed that she would quit and focus on building the house. She was spending a lot of time with Cliff, which I didn't think much about because he was about 20 years older than her and married. I knew that there were a lot of days where Cliff would be over at our apartment going over things with her, or she would be on the build sites checking on things. Every time Cliff was over at our apartment, he was gone before I came home. I didn't think much about it, and honestly I was kind of relieved. The last thing I wanted to do after a long day at work was go home and make small talk with someone I barely knew. The only thing that occurred to me and struck me as somewhat odd was that sometimes I would come home on days that Cliff was at the apartment and my wife would be fresh out of the shower by the time I arrived. I never said anything about it, but I thought it was strange. Looking back, I realized that she was likely showering after sleeping with him. I had a big sales meeting to go to in Arizona, so I made all of my travel arrangements and I was scheduled to be gone for 4 days. I left for the conference and the first 2 days were fine. My wife usually called me around dinner time while I was away, and she did just as she always did one night. I was at dinner with a colleague, so I didn't answer the phone. I knew that it was my wife and I figured she would just send me a text message after I didn't answer. I didn't pay attention to my phone for the rest of the night, but when I got back to my hotel room, I saw that I had a 3-minute-long voicemail from her. We never left voicemails for each other, so it was odd. On top of that, it was 3 minutes long. I have never seen a voicemail that long in my entire life. I listened to it and was pretty surprised about what I heard. At first, it was just some jumbled noises in the background. I thought maybe she put the phone in her pockets and was just walking around the house. I almost stopped and deleted it, but then I saw the transcript. There were some indications that she might have been having a conversation with someone, so my curiosity got the better of me and I listened to it. I heard a voice that I immediately recognized as Cliff's not far away from the phone. He asked if I answered and my wife said that I didn't. He asked her how long he had to wait until he could touch her again, and she told him that since he hadn't answered her call, she wouldn't answer mine. It was quiet on the other end for the most part, but I heard an occasional moan from my wife. Toward the end of the voicemail, Cliff said something that indicated that he had performed some kind of sexual act on my wife during the voicemail recording. They both proceeded to tell each other very dirty things, and then the voicemail cut off. I was beyond shocked at what happened, and I immediately changed my flight time to leave the following morning. It was clear that my wife was having sex with Cliff. I put other pieces together after I heard the voicemail, and I figured it might have been happening for a little while. I got back to my apartment in the early afternoon the following day. I wasn't expecting to walk in on my wife sleeping with Cliff, but I did. They were taking full advantage of my absence. They stepped away from each other when they saw me, and I practically pushed Cliff out of the door of my apartment so he would leave. I told him that he was fired from the job and he asked me to reconsider. I just slammed the door in his face. My wife tried to explain what was happening to me, but I wasn't hearing it. She kept asking me about why I was home early, and I played the voicemail for her. She immediately knew that there wasn't anything that she could do to recover from that. I told her that I wasn't going to be with a cheater and I planned on divorcing her. I think she thought she might have some ground to stand on in the divorce, but I knew that she wouldn't. On top of firing Cliff from a job that he was making a lot of money from, I told his wife about the affair. From what I gathered, it wasn't his first time sleeping with someone else. However, she told me that it would be the last time you cheated on her. I was glad to find out that they had also gotten a divorce. My wife tried to argue that she should get to keep the house that we were building because she was the one putting in all of the work for it. It was her design. She was overseeing the construction, everything. Luckily for me, my divorce attorney was incredible and they didn't let that happen. I was awarded the house and I hired someone else to finish off where Cliff stopped. I made sure the house was everything my wife ever wanted in a home. I sold it after it was finished. I didn't need the money, I just didn't want the house. When my wife saw that, she called me and yelled at me for selling the house that she would have happily taken, but it was mine and I didn't owe it to her. I'm working now to try and move on from this. I had never been cheated on in my life before this. I know that there are people out there who wouldn't behave the way that she did, but it's hard to move past. I'm hoping that sometime soon in the future, I'll be able to move on. I can't imagine finding out about an affair the way that you did. Catching her through a voicemail and listening to it, wondering if what you heard is really what happened has to be difficult. It definitely seems like they were waiting for you to leave so they can have their time together. On top of that, it doesn't seem like they were doing a lot of work for the house while you're at work. Your wife showering after Cliff left was the giveaway as to what was happening between them. You definitely can't blame yourself for not seeing those signs. When you marry somebody, you trust them and you don't expect that they will hurt you in any way. Both of them were extremely selfish in everything they did, and I'm glad that they didn't wind up happy in the end. Your wife didn't deserve the house that was being built. The audacity of your wife acting like you were in the wrong for selling the house is incredible. She cheated on you and she still thought she deserved the house. It doesn't even make sense. Thank you all for taking the time to listen to today's stories. If you enjoyed listening, please feel free to like and subscribe if you haven't already. Also, comment below with your thoughts on what happened. If there is a story you would like to share with me about your own situation or someone else's, then please do not hesitate to contact me.